Good evening and welcome to session 5. I have upgraded the screen in this room to a larger, it's 7 inches larger and it's a little bit closer. And this way you're getting the full screen as opposed to me just live streaming a Zoom from the TV. For those of you watching on YouTube, that means nothing to you. But the people with whom I'm face to face are thrilled. You want to applaud just so they know that they're. See, that's not me clapping. They're real live human beings here. This is session 5. And for those who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to step away from the camera and you're welcome. Let me just get this to the right place.
It's very interesting.
Oh. This is the dilemma. How do I get the machine to work properly?
Do we have a syllabus this week?
Oh, yes. Yes, you have I have the handouts for you. Oh, man. Right. Survival and ethics. That's our topic for this evening. Survival and ethics. This class, just as a reminder, is about dilemmas, about things that we might think of as being opposites of each other, that are in conflict with each other. So survival and ethics, the enduring question that we're going to tackle this evening is survival at what cost? At what point does our survival compromise what's worth surviving for? How do we balance this imperative to ensure Jewish survival with our obligation to act ethically? Survival and ethics. As I've done for the past 4 weeks, I'm going to walk us through a few texts, and what's going to be different tonight is we're going to look at some case studies or some scenarios. We'll start with some texts for reflection. The first is Genesis 12, 10 through 20 from last week's Torah portion. There was a famine in the land of Canaan, and Avram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are." That's nice. If the Egyptians see you and think she is his wife, they will kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may remain alive thanks to you. That's not so romantic. But the sister-wife motif shows up a few other places in Torah. When Avram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw how very beautiful the woman was. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's palace. And because of her, it went well with Avram. He acquired sheep, oxen, donkeys, male and female slaves, jennies, and camels. But God afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues. That'll never happen again. On account of Sarai, the wife of Avram. Pharaoh sent for Avram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now, here is your wife. Take her and be gone." And Pharaoh put some men in charge of him, and they sent him off with his wife and all that he possessed. That's a beautiful story, isn't it? Sure. It was so beautiful that our Bat Mitzvah chanted it for us this past Saturday. These very verses, because these come right after Avram and Sarai's call, the Lech Lecha, go forth to become a people. Survival and ethics. What's the problem here? What's the issue here between survival and ethics that Avram and Sarai and Pharaoh present us?
I mean, she was his wife, but because he was afraid that they're gonna kill him, then he told everybody that he was his sister,
Yeah. So she's not my wife. She's my sister. So
right?
Feel free.
enjoy. Got a problem? You love that, don't you, Greer?
That would be a problem for Sarah.
No, it's a problem for Sarai. It should be a problem for Avram. For whom is it a problem?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh is the one who says, "What the heck is the matter with you, Avram? You brought plagues on me because I've committed this cardinal sin, and it's your fault." But he doesn't kill Avram, which was what Avram was balancing survival and ethics by doing something unethical in order to survive. Why didn't they just stay in Canaan? It's to say in verse 10. There was a famine, survival and ethics. Avram and Sarai are balancing the need to survive twice here. Once to survive famine, and second to survive going into Egypt, into Pharaoh's court, because Avram and Sarai were not just ordinary people looking to find a place at La Quinta. They were on their way. They were Avram, Big Daddy, and Sarai, meaning princess. They were important, and they were treated as dignitaries. And this theme of a famine in the land and people leaving the land of Canaan, leaving the land of Israel to go to Egypt is going to recur. That is how the children of Israel are going to get into Egypt at the end of the book of Genesis that leads to the rest of the Torah. So there's a little bit of foreshadowing here, and a little bit of foreshadowing the trickery against Pharaoh, of using Pharaoh as a fool, playing him for a fool. Avram and Sarai survive, but at what cost? Avram is deceptive about Sarai and blurs the line between our survival instinct and an ethical failure. And Sarai forgives him. Not that he asks for it, not that we read that she forgives him, but they go on with their lives. We should be careful not to judge them against the standards of what's appropriate for us today. But I'm pretty sure that most of us, if we were to claim that somebody with whom we had made a marriage or commitment vow, if we were to go on vacation or be fleeing someplace and say, pretend like we don't really know each other, there'd probably be hell to pay on the drive back. Survival and ethics, literally at the beginning of the story of the Jewish people. Somebody is going to hurt us if we disclose too much about ourselves. We're always balancing between surviving and being our highest moral and ethical selves. Still, we are commanded to choose life. Judaism is obsessed with life. I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Uvacharta v'chayim. Choose life if you and your offspring would live, by loving the eternal your God, by heeding God's commandments, by holding fast to God, for thereby you shall have life and shall long endure upon the soil that God swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them. This comes in Parashat Nitzavim. Nitzavim is the section that we read not only in the regular cycle of the Torah readings, but we read Nitzavim on Yom Kippur as well. You're standing this day, all of you, before the eternal your God. It is the renewal of the covenant. And we're told, choose life. But what kind of life? Vacharta v'chayim. What does chayim mean here? Is this physical life? Is it a moral life? Is it a life with purpose? Choose life. Spiritual life. Choose a spiritual life.
I think all the three.
All three? What's the alternative to life?
Death.
Mm-hmm. And what else? Destruction, suffering. We have these antonyms, life and death, blessing and curse, which seems very binary, but we see that life is lived in these gray areas between survival and ethics. What good is choosing life if you're always about to be killed? You know, having ethical principles, that's critically important. If you keep getting threatened because of your principles, you can read it as I'm doing something right, or you may be doing something wrong. And choosing life means choosing it life over and over again. Every day and every time you're at a crossroads, do I choose life or do I choose death? Do I choose a path of violence or a path of peace? So I'll give you an example from Jewish history about what it means to choose life. How many of you, just by show of hands, how many have been to the land of Israel, into the state of Israel? How many of you have been up to Masada? Who walked up to Masada? Yeah. Do you understand why they died up there? They didn't want to go back down. I used to volunteer when I would lead birthright trips. I would volunteer to stay back with the kid with the crutches. So I'm sorry, I can't climb Masada again. Masada is a great tourist attraction, not just because Herod built a fortress there, but what happened in the 1st century of the Common Era, or the 2nd century of the Common Era at Masada.
Jews chose to end their life rather than acquiesce to his wishes.
Yes, rather than give in to the Romans who had to build a ramp in order to get up there, the people on Masada chose to die. They did not heed Deuteronomy 30. And they couldn't claim that they didn't know it.
Well, they probably would have been tortured if they would not have killed themselves.
They may have been tortured. They certainly, if they had not been tortured, they certainly would have been taken into captivity, may have been killed. How many of you have been to Yavna in Israel? Yavna. It's not a tourist attraction, but Yavna is choosing life. In the 1st century, when the temple was falling, as the story goes, Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was one of the first generations of the Tanaim, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, as the legend goes, was smuggled out of Jerusalem in a coffin, and he's stopped by the centurions, and they threatened to run a sword through the coffin, and he said, he comes out and says, and he predicts magically who the new emperor is going to be, and he says, "Give me Yavna and its sages." And Yochanan ben Zakkai and his students were able to escape to Yavna and create rabbinic Judaism. It had already started, so I'm elaborating a little bit, but we wouldn't have the Talmud and we wouldn't have rabbinic Judaism as we practice it today if everybody had gone to Masada. If you choose life, sometimes it is compromising what you might consider to be something that you wouldn't ordinarily compromise. Think, fast forward 1400 years to the Spanish Inquisition, to conversos, people who were forced to convert to Christianity and practice Judaism in secret. And there are still descendants of conversos today. It's quite common for there to be people who are practicing Catholicism but do Jewish things. They don't know why they do them, but there are plenty of families who, does anybody have examples of things that converso families do? Maybe lighting candles on Friday night after you've closed all the doors and windows and shutters. Why would you close all the doors and windows and shutters before you light Shabbat candles? You don't want the neighbors to know that you're practicing Judaism. And just like that old story about the person who, the newlywed who cuts off the ends of the brisket, you know that one? Cuts off the ends of the brisket, and the spouse says, "Why are you cutting off the ends of the brisket?" Well, that's why we've always done it that way. And it turns out that That's how the grandparents used to do it, because they didn't have a pan big enough for the entire brisket. So they would cut off the ends of the brisket so that it would fit in the pan. Well, you got a bigger pan, but you still cut off the ends of the brisket. Conversos, whose ancestors chose to compromise, and survival and ethics said, it's more important for us to survive and practice our tradition in secret than it is for us to become martyrs. Now, you must have some things for which you're willing to give up everything, but there aren't that many in Judaism. This is from the Babylonian Talmud, from Tractate Sanhedrin, page 74a. Choose life, except under 3 categories. If one is told, transgress so that you will not be killed, one may transgress any commandment of the Torah except for these 3: idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder. These 3 things are, in Hebrew, it's avodah zarah, gilui arayot, and shvichut damim. Or as I learned them in Ashkenazi Hebrew, it's avodah zarah. Let me make sure I get these right for Rabbi Spitzer. Avodah zarah, gilui arayos, and shvichus damim. These are the cardinal sins in Judaism. So if somebody says to you, eat this bacon double cheeseburger with extra bread on Yom Kippur, or I am going to kill you, tuck in that napkin and put on your Burger King crown and go to town, because your life is not worth that cheeseburger. If somebody says to you, kill that person or I'm going to kill you, no, that's murder. And the Talmud gives you what my Talmud professor taught us, the Jack Benny argument. No, I'm thinking, your money or your life. Whose blood is redder? This is what the Talmud says. Whose blood is redder? If Matt is coming to kill me, I am not allowed. I'm allowed to kill Matt. Don't try it, Kamsha Arnold. But why would I be commanded to kill Matt?
Stop me from doing the sin, obviously.
To stop him from committing murder. It's not just about self-defense. It's, who is Matt to say that his blood is redder than mine? And conversely, who am I to say that my blood is redder than Matt's? Likewise, if Matt tells Mark, come kill David, Matt, or I'm going to kill you, Mark is supposed to let Matt kill him, because Mark should not commit that cardinal sin. Whose blood is redder? It's all the same. We're all the same. And then sexual immorality. What Gilui Arayot really means is uncovering what should be covered. It really means committing acts of sexual violence. That if somebody says to you, do this or I'm going to kill you, you're better to sacrifice your own life than to commit that cardinal sin. And idolatry, because the whole Torah is really a missive against worshiping other gods. So it becomes tricky in things like the Inquisition, because you can pretend. I'm not really, I'm doing the rosary, but I don't mean it. Survival and ethics. But otherwise, survival, you do whatever it takes, but not at the expense of somebody else's life.
The Aharon argument. Tomorrow will be a festival for Hashem. With the
With
episode
the golden calf?
He tries to spin it. Well, you're doing this, but we'll nudge it in the right direction without opposing the crowd. And who is the character? Her, right? Gets killed by the crowd because he tries to stop the people outright. Maybe that's an example, because who were the 2 people who held up Moshe's arms in the battle of Amalek?
I can't remember.
I think they were Caleb and Hur, and that's how they explain why Hur wasn't around later, because he actively opposed the crowd and they trampled him.
They killed him. So Aaron knew not to sacrifice his own life.
It doesn't sound great for Aaron, but maybe there's an exculpation a little bit.
So there are limits to self-preservation in Judaism. Choose life, but not at any cost. Now we jump to Maimonides. So I like to fast forward 700 years. In the Mishnah Torah, Maimonides and his laws of kings and wars, he turned now from murder to fruit trees. We should not cut down fruit trees outside a city, nor prevent an irrigation ditch from bringing water to them so that they dry up. This is Maimonides writing in the 12th century. As Deuteronomy 20:19 states, do not destroy its trees. Anyone who cuts down such a tree should be lashed. This does not apply only in a siege, but in all situations. Anyone who cuts down a fruit tree with a destructive intent should be lashed. Nevertheless, a fruit tree may be cut down if it causes damage to other trees or to fields belonging to others, or if a high price could be received for its wood. The Torah only prohibited cutting down a tree with a destructive intent. The heck is that about? Never cut down a fruit tree. I've never seen a fruit tree. What's so important about fruit trees and choosing life?
Well, because they bear fruit to give life to someone. So if you cut them down, you're actually not affording that opportunity for someone to pick that fruit and live.
Yes, you're taking food out of somebody's mouth. And not just any food, but food that can reproduce itself. So when we rewind back to the story of creation and Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. And the Mishnah says that when explaining why the Hebrew text in the Torah says, God says to Cain, your brother's bloods cry out to me from the earth. It says, kol demei achecha tzoakim alai min haaretz. The plural, your brother's bloods. The interpretation that's expounded on in the Mishnah is, it wasn't just Abel that Cain killed. It was everybody who would come after Abel. It was every generation that could come from Abel. Now, in practical terms for us as Jews, right now there are about 14 million Jews in the world. Had it not been for the Holocaust, there would be geometrically more Jews, because beyond those 6 million is everybody who could have been produced from those 6 million, which is what you alluded to that in what you wrote to me today, that the potential for life that is in fruit, a seed-bearing fruit, so a tree, and let's take an apple tree. When, where does an apple tree come from? From the seeds of an apple that come from an apple tree. So it's cyclical. When you cut down that tree, you are not choosing life. So if your intent is to destroy rather than sustain, which is why Maimonides puts in here the caveat that if you could get a really good price for the wood, which would enable you to do what?
Plant more trees.
Plant more trees. Exactly. So buy high, sell low. That's my motto. Buy high, sell low. Even in war, and this is what Maimonides is coming to, even in war, there are ethical boundaries that remain non-negotiable. In modern conflict, we know that there are rules for engagement. Not everybody follows them. And this is what, as a Zionist, this is what irks me, is that nothing that the state of Israel does is going to be righteous in the eyes of many people. But as a Zionist, I cringe every time there is a legitimate beef with the Israel Defense Forces, because it's what in Hebrew is called giving a pitchon peh, giving an opening to the people who are going to say, look at how awful Israel is. Well, you don't need proof. It's asymmetrical warfare because one side follows rules and one side doesn't. So the side that follows the rules, more is expected of that side. We're going to come to this with our scenarios, but think about this: a tradition that goes so far as to protect fruit trees is not a culture of death. It is a culture of life, sustaining life, so much so that in 2005, when Israel withdrew from Gaza and pulled Israeli Jews kicking and screaming out of the Gaza Strip, Israel left greenhouses and all kinds of stuff that were promptly destroyed, not by Jews. So one side chooses life and one side doesn't. And this is, I'm going to sound really cynical, that was way back in 2005. So people on college campuses who support Hamas weren't born yet. All right, let's move forward to Irving Greenberg. Is that showing up on there? No. No. Okay. Irving Greenberg, who did not know Moses Maimonides. Irving Greenberg is a giant of a rabbi. He's well over 6 feet tall, and he's brilliant. Irving Greenberg is in his 90s now. He's a modern Orthodox rabbi who was excoriated for this speech. He was excoriated from the Jewish right, saying that he was too liberal. So this is an Orthodox rabbi who is an unabashed Zionist. Just goes to show sometimes you can't please everybody. So
We were at
you were at this in 2000?
Yeah, speak.
Where was it?
I know so many, David. I don't remember what city it was in, but it was the crowd. There were over 2,000 people in the auditorium. And when he finished, I would say that all but maybe 100 people stood up.
Really?
So yes, he was, there was blowback,
Yeah.
but the people who were sitting there that day respected
Yeah.
him for what he said.
Irving Greenberg is a brilliant teacher. I think he created Klal. And his wife, Blue Greenberg, BLU, is a pioneering modern Orthodox feminist. So Irving Greenberg gave this address to what was called the General Assembly of the United Jewish Communities, which today is the Jewish Federations of North America. The first, and this 2000, so for the context, 2000, this was in November. This was several months after the failed Camp David Accords between Ehud Barak, Yasser Arafat, and Bill Clinton, which Clinton still to this day considers to be his greatest failure. So the first, of course, is your life. Protecting your life, Jewish life, comes first. Sounds like somebody who hates Jews, doesn't it? No. It's a fundamental Jewish law. So whatever attempt we make to be moral and to be peaceful must do justice to that, or it's immoral. Because in the end, what you are doing is sacrificing people's lives who have no right to be sacrificed. Second step is you seek to find peace again. And how do you do that? The second step means not to demonize all Arabs. Now, when I say not demonize, how much worse can it get than I describe the actual behavior? This speech is available online if you want to read it. So the honest answer is it doesn't matter. It's not demonizing if you describe the wrong behavior. You describe what's wrong, like destroying the greenhouses in Gaza. It is demonizing when you begin to say all Arabs, or they'll never be partners for peace, or they'll never be ready for democracy, or whatever, or anything goes because they're all animals. The dehumanizing of a people, that is immoral, unethical, and un-Jewish. At the intersection of Jewish military power and Jewish ethics, we are the first generation, and by I mean people alive today of any age, to have to struggle with this question. People here who are Jewish by birth, our grandparents, definitely our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents, never had these ethical dilemmas because there were no Jews with power. So it's easy to write a Talmud, or it's easy to be Moses Maimonides, who was a court physician to Saladin. It's easy to do that when you're powerless. It's easy to be the opposition, to be in the minority and to proclaim great ethical truths. It's another thing to do that when you have tanks and guns. And this is the first generation to deal with this problem. And it's a good problem to have. I would much rather have to deal with ethical dilemmas than to be marched off to a gas chamber. And this is the survival and ethics. This is at the heart of the survival and ethics at the heart of progressive Zionism. Is in order for the Jewish state to be both Jewish and democratic, it cannot, occupy people without full civil rights and citizenship. It's impossible. You can be Jewish or you can be democratic. So why hasn't this been solved? Well, 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza and peace did not break out. So in the West Bank, facts on the ground have allowed for the building of settlements and so forth, and it's come to a head where it happened last week at the World Zionist Congress, a battle between left, right, and center. I just read today that Yesh Atid, one of the progressive parties, just left the World Zionist Congress. It's this battle over survival and ethics. That how can Israel, if Israel grants citizenship to all Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, it will no longer be a Jewish state. If Israel does not grant citizenship and continues to exert military force, then people will criticize Israel for being undemocratic. Now, this is different than Israeli Arabs, who are full citizens of the state of Israel. But I'm talking about especially people in the West Bank. And I think what Irving Greenberg was describing in 2000, which was already 25 years ago this month that he gave this speech, a lifetime ago, was how many times do you keep trying for peace? Jewish survival and ethics says as many times as it takes. All right, now we're going to look at some scenarios.
Mhm.
Yes, Rabbi Spitzer.
Just to go back to your very first Bible quote about Abraham and Sarai going to Egypt. Pharaoh says to Abraham, "You set me up. Why did you do that?" Take a look now at Moses before the, or at God before the Exodus, setting up Pharaoh. We have this. That to me is an ethical dilemma of divine proportions.
Whether Pharaoh really had agency or was he being used?
It was, well, at least according to, some of the interpretations, when it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, that's set up.
Yeah. So what's the Jewish dilemma there? Was Pharaoh incapable of changing his mind?
He was not incapable of changing his mind, except God set him up.
Yeah, God set him up. And I think we can argue that God sets us all up. God set up Abraham. In Genesis 22, God set up Abraham. Abraham passed the test. We can argue, I think, that Pharaoh failed the test. And how do we know that Pharaoh failed the test? What does he do as soon as the people leave? Chases them. He didn't do teshuvah. He didn't repent. Yeah. So it says in Genesis 22 at the beginning of the binding of Isaac, "V'haya achar hadvarim ha'ela v'Elohim nisa et Avraham." It happened after these things that God tested Abraham. We're always being tested. Pharaoh is this Pharaoh, Achashverosh, Nebuchadnezzar. I think a classic rabbinic reading of all of these people is they're stooges, but stooges with extraordinary power who can be manipulated pretty masterfully by other human beings. Achashverosh in the Purim story is manipulated by Haman. Now you're supposed to boo. Boo. Goodness. And he was manipulated by Mordecai, and he was manipulated by Esther. Pharaoh is manipulated by Joseph, who interprets his dream and tells him what he wants to hear. And but are there kings of Israel who get manipulated? Oh yeah, and they are manipulative as well. And in setting up this kingdom of Israel, it wasn't supposed to be a king at all. Why were there kings?
Give us a king so we can be like all the other nations around us.
We want to be like everybody. They got a king, give us a king. Okay, but your king is going to have limits. And one of those things is We're going to tie it right back to Abraham and Moses. One of the things that a king is not allowed to do is get horses from Egypt. It seems like a strange thing. A king is not allowed to, a king has to have a copy of the Torah by the bed. It's always staying in nice hotels. And a king is not allowed to go down to Egypt to get horses. I think because what happens when Jews go down to Egypt? No good. Get enticed. We stay. We want to be just like everybody else. And the whole Torah, the whole wandering in the desert is this tension between getting away from Egypt and going towards Canaan and not becoming either Egyptian or Canaanite. Is putting all of that stuff aside. The corollary in our lives would be if we are migrating, if we're moving from one place to another out of need, is not to hold on too much to the bad things of the places where we come and not to adopt the bad things of the places where we're going. To balance this survival and ethics, we have to blend in, we have to acculturate, but not assimilate. In order to be accepted and to be productive in our environments, we have to acculturate. But we're no good to anybody as a people if we become just like everybody else. We end up giving in to our worst impulses. They've got a king, we want a king. And what happens with our king? Becomes corrupt, like King David. But gives us a great name. All right, scenarios. First scenario. A congregation institutes ID checks and armed guards. Some feel protected, others feel alienated. What's the balance between survival and ethics, or what's the question? Who's right? Now give me a Jewish answer to who's right. Both right. They're both right. Some say, on the one hand,
depends on the environment in the times.
Yeah.
But that's hard to predict because the idea of having an armed guard and an ID check, I guess, is trying to assess the probability of a bad actor coming in. You obviously want to filter that person, or if the person did actually come, to make that person ineffective. But then what's the probability of that? Because compared to that possibility, it might not seem like a lot, but then practically week after week, everybody has the inconvenience of doing that. It looks intimidating. And I could see why somebody wouldn't like it. It would seem unfriendly, but then think again of that probability. How do you decide?
See, you are so Jewish. You talked yourself into it and out of it in like 3 sentences. Bravo, man. Rabbinical school is coming for you. This is a real life scenario that every synagogue, we used to think, oh, it's just in Europe. I remember I went to Italy 30 or 29 years ago. I remember because it was my honeymoon. And we went to a number of synagogues, and I was like, well, there's armed guards. This is 29 years ago. Now, if I go to a synagogue and there's not an armed guard, I assume it's Messianic. I just assume they're not Jewish. It's become part of our daily lives. And it's a balance between security and openness. And I think that there is a happy medium here, that I wouldn't feel comfortable going into a synagogue that didn't have some kind of security. That part of the survival is being ethical about it, is making sure that we are being good stewards of every resource, including our people. Which is why these doors are locked. You cannot just come into this building.
Yeah, but that didn't used to be that way. A long time ago, the doors were perfectly open. And
Oh, yeah.
maybe
30,
they
40
have-
years
so
ago.
it depends on the circumstances.
Yeah.
Times.
Yeah, and maybe the times will change, but not while there are, not after Tree of Life and Poway, California, and what happened in Manchester, England, and lots of other places as well. The Jewish Federation of Seattle. Okay, so that's a practical thing. There's another one: refugee solidarity and internal security. A Jewish organization advocates for welcoming refugees from a war-torn country. Some community members push back, citing security concerns, anti-Semitic attitudes among some refugee populations, or fear of political backlash. this is also a real life situation. Are there countries where anti-Semitism is rampant?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
We
we live in one.
live in one, yeah.
And do some of these countries have refugees who move to places where there are Jews? Yes. This is a real life thing. Survival and ethics. One of the most prominent refugee resettlement organizations is HIAS. It's the organization for which last week's bat mitzvah was raising money, because her family was brought to the United States with the help of HIAS. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society does not just advocate for and raise money for resettling Jews. There is a specific organization that does that, the Joint Distribution Committee. But there are organizations that are run by, funded by, supported by, organized by, founded by Jews that help to resettle people who hate Jews. So survival and ethics. Should we stop doing that?
Well, sometimes the best way to disarm somebody is to just let them beat you.
Yeah.
You treat them kindly, and sometimes that will change their whole demeanor and the whole attitude toward you.
Yep.
Same thing with Israel. They send, labeled packages. This comes from Israel.
Yeah. And of course, there are always going to be people who say, no, that's it's whitewashing these genocidal war crime Jews. We got people in Canton who say that. But should that stop us from doing the right thing? The ethical part of Judaism says, no, you do not do the right thing because you're thanked for it. You do not do the right thing even because people know about it. So Israel will regularly send aid to places without Israel does say who they're from, but will send to places that are ravaged by natural disasters, for example, without marking that they're Israeli. When Rabbi Spitzer had a program a few weeks ago with two Arab doctors from the Western Galilee, one of whom is Muslim and one of whom is Christian. They're married to each other, and they work at a hospital that helped people during the Syrian civil war. What business do Israelis have helping Syrians? It's the right thing to do. Your ethics, in this case, they take a Hippocratic oath. Your ethics tell you whose blood is redder. You treat the person who is right in front of you. You help the refugee who needs it, because in the beginning of the story of the Jewish people, you flip back a few pages to Genesis 10. Or no, I'm sorry, Genesis 12, verse 10. There was a famine in the land. Why did Avram and Sarai go into Egypt? They were refugees who were hungry. Now, maybe the corollary to that should be, don't go asking for food and pawning off your spouse on somebody else. Okay.
We should always treat people with respect.
It would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. I vote with Hezekiah on that one. Holocaust education versus universalization. A Jewish institution partners with other ethnic groups on a shared genocide education initiative. I guess it would be anti-genocide, not how to do genocide. Some community members worry that Holocaust uniqueness will be diminished or flattened. That the Holocaust was unique. It was the intersection of opportunity, centuries of European anti-Semitism, and the mechanization after the Industrial Revolution on an enormous scale. It's not the first time that people tried to exterminate the Jews, but it was the first time that people had the technology and a population willing to enact it, or willing to use it. So a Holocaust museum that partners with, say, a Native American museum about the systemic persecution in this country of the indigenous population, does that cheapen the Holocaust? Well, there are some who would say, no, we cannot draw comparisons. That once we say, if you say that the Holocaust is unique, it has to be unique in a literal sense, not very unique. There's no such thing as very unique. It's either unique or it's not unique. So if it opens the door to people saying, well, that's genocide. This is genocide. That's so it's survival and ethics. The balance to this is Jews cannot be the only people educating people about the Holocaust. What's the purpose of a Holocaust museum is to bring people who are not Jewish, to teach them about what happened, because here's a sobering reality. I'm going to give you 3 pieces of data. The first, I already told you that ours is this generation since 1948 is the first Jewish generation in about 2,000 years to live at a time when there is Jewish sovereignty, where there is a Jewish army. The last time before 1948 was the Hanukkah story, was the Hasmoneans in the first and second century before the Common Era. The second historical data point is that we are living at a time when there will be more Jews living inside the land of Israel than outside of the land of Israel for the first time since the destruction of the Second Temple. Sometime, I don't know if it's happened already, but at some point in our lifetimes, that's will be a valid data point. And the third is, this is the last generation that will have meaningful interaction with Holocaust survivors. So I know for many of us, Holocaust survivors were ubiquitous in our childhood and even throughout adulthood. There is one Holocaust survivor, excuse me, that I know of living in Stark County right now. It's Barbara Turkeltab. And Rabbi Spitzer, when you moved here, can you guesstimate how many there were?
Oh, gee. Diane, you can help us with that.
Couple dozen.
Couple dozen? Yeah, that sounds about right.
So a few dozen.
Yeah.
In a community this size. So you multiply that in New York and Los Angeles and Cleveland and places where there are higher percentages of Jews and of migrants. This is the last generation that will have meaningful interaction with Holocaust survivors because World War II ended 80 years ago. So I'll take my kids as an example. My younger kids are 16. Anybody that they talk with now who is a Holocaust survivor was a child when the war ended. It's quite different than if you were born in 1950 or 1970. So we have a responsibility to make sure that those stories do not die. Next is synagogue security versus, oh no, I'm sorry, I already did that one. Peace agreements with moral compromise. Israel signs a peace accord with a regime known for human rights violations in order to secure national security and normalization. Pick a country, any country. Jordan, Egypt. Israel has enjoyed more peaceful borders than hostile borders since 1994. So that's more than 30 years. It's pretty remarkable that peace has held. We shouldn't take that for granted either. With the Abraham Accords, there's a possibility that Israel will have normalized relations with much of the Sunni Arab world. So is peace that costs more credibility worth it? Maybe. Does survival in a hostile region require pragmatic alliances? Yes. You don't make peace with your friends. You're already at peace with your friends. You make peace with your enemies. And Jewish ethical tradition can guide statecraft, that there are certain barriers that we just won't cross. So as horrendous as this war in Gaza has been, what for Israel has been the pressing concern?
Hamas will develop again and
Yeah, so
with
I'm sure they will, and it'll be another issue. But what has been the drumbeat amongst Israelis and amongst diaspora Jews? The hostages. The hostages. That has been a deal breaker. And that is what forced the ceasefire, was making deals with unsavory people. Jewish ethical tradition can guide statecraft. My fear is that when Israel really becomes a country just like any other country, we've lost the moral high ground. Donor funding and ethical dissonance. Every community should have this problem if somebody wanted to give you $100 million. A major Jewish foundation offers significant financial support to a synagogue, but the donor has made public statements or supported causes that contradict the congregation's stated values on justice or inclusion. This congregation, this community does not have named facilities. But imagine, I don't know, give me a controversial Jewish person.
Wow.
Jeffrey Epstein. That's the one I was looking for. Let's imagine that he's alive and not living in the International Space Station, which I know he is, because somebody has to be controlling the space lasers. Jeffrey Epstein, Rabbi Spitzer, I would like to give $100 million to Temple Israel, and you name the sanctuary the Jeffrey Epstein Sanctuary, and you say better than the preschool? Too soon.
Look at $90 million and call it the Jeffrey Epstein brothel.
That's right. So an ethical, there is ethical dissonance here. At what point have you sold your soul? So I'll give you. There's an old joke about this. That it's a secular Jew who's known for making really horrendous statements about Orthodox Judaism is visited by an Orthodox rabbi who's a fundraiser and says, Mr. Schwartz, I would like to ask you for a donation to build a yeshiva in Jerusalem. And he says, oh, sure, I'll give you whatever. How much do you need? He said, it'll be $10 million. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $15 million, but I've got a very strict rule. In this yeshiva of yours, I don't want any of your students having yarmulkes or payas or tzitzis or anything like that. If you can meet those, $15 million, I'll write you the check. And the rabbi says, I have no problem whatsoever. And 10 months later, he was welcomed to the ribbon cutting at the Mr. Schwartz Yeshiva for Girls. There's certain ethical dissonance where you can take advantage. Otherwise, it's an issue that there are unsavory people. There was a case of a junk bonds guy in Los Angeles. This is 30 years ago, and I was living there, whose name was on a campus. And eventually it was taken off because you can always find somebody with other principles who's willing to give you more. The last one is Israel, asylum seekers, and deportation. American Jews can advocate for whatever we want because we're not in control of the United States. Israel is under Jewish authority. So the Israeli government enacts policies to deport African asylum seekers. Supporters cite demographic concerns and social burden. Critics argue that the move contradicts Jewish ethical and historical responsibility to protect the vulnerable. So here we have the intersection of Jewish power and authority with Jewish ethics. Do you welcome strangers who hate you? Do you open your door to somebody who has been taught that you're the devil? On the one hand, Hezekiah says the best way to counter that kind of bigotry is for people to meet each other and see that we're not demons. We don't drink the blood of. I was on a panel once in San Marcos, Texas. It was like the beginning of a joke where there was a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew, and the Christian was a Southern Baptist, and I was a Jewish guy, and the Muslim was this lovely guy from Turkey. And after we did our panel, he said to me, "You seem so nice. What's the difference between you and a Zionist Jew?" And I said, "Well, I am a Zionist Jew." And we had a lovely coffee after that. I built a nice relationship with him. And in fact, he ended up nominating me for an interfaith award that I still have in the office. But what's the difference? I could have said, "Well, what's the difference?" Is that I've reached my quota of drinking your people's blood for the day. I didn't say that. But our principles and our need for survival often confront each other. And we need that balance, because if we go to one extreme or the other, we have sacrificed both survival and ethics. If we leave the doors unlocked because we want to sing Kumbaya, we make ourselves an easy target. If we lock the doors and put up a fence and make this into a fortress, we tell people who are seeking, don't bother the Jews. Don't bother asking Jews. We tell Jews, not that you're not safe. We tell Jews, be afraid. We tell Jews, we're going to make it as hard as possible for you to get in here. And then once you're here, we're going to ask you for more money to pay for the walls and the doors and all the other stuff. There are ethical obligations that outweigh survival concerns and vice versa. But never again means not just to us. Never again means not just to us. Judaism demands both survival and a soul. So our task as Jews is not merely to survive, but to survive as B'nai Adam, as human beings who embody justice, compassion, and restraint, even under threat. Judaism teaches us not just to survive, but to survive with our Jewish souls intact, lest we become just like everybody else. To choose life means to protect existence without losing that spiritual life. To protect life without losing our own divinity and recognizing that everybody else is created in the divine image as well. It cannot just be us versus the world. It has to be us as part of the world. And the only way we could have the chutzpah to ask somebody else to stand with us is if we stand with them. If we become what we detest, we will neither survive nor be ethical. But if we're able somehow to balance surviving and being ethical, we're able to survive with our souls intact. Next time, we're going to look at lament and hope. Unless you think, why those two things? Well, I'll give away part of it. What's the name of the Israeli national anthem? Atikva, which I learned today that the treasurer of our congregation has as his ringtone, because we were in a meeting with him and his phone kept ringing and hear dun, 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 dun. Hatikva, which means hope. And there is a book of the Torah, or book of the Bible, that means Lamentations. Echa, the book that we read on Tisha B'Av. Lament and hope are so central to Judaism that one is our national anthem and the other is an entire book of our sacred scripture. So we're going to look at these as antonyms that cannot live without each other. You can only lament if you have hope, and you can only have hope if you're willing to lament. All right, go out and survive. Yes.
The right that is to expect more about Jewish people.
Do we have the right as Jews to expect more of Jewish people?
Like Epstein, a good example. Or unfortunately, they are a Jewish in the West Bank with throwing stones to the farmers that were Palestinian. Well, they're Jews, and do they have the right to do that?
So I say yes. As Jews, not only do we have the right to expect more of ourselves, we have the obligation to expect more of ourselves. What we don't have the right to do is to expect more of other people.
There's never a complaint about this group of people that are throwing stones to the farmer.
There's lots of people complaining against it. Last week, there was a protest in Jerusalem. If you want to hear Jews argue with each other, Israel is the place, because you'll learn all kinds of new Hebrew words. You remember when we were in Israel 2 years ago that we had to make a diversion around the Knesset because there were protests going on, people protesting the Netanyahu government.
Yes,
A couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was just last week, there were about 650,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews who protested in Jerusalem. They were protesting being drafted into the military. The cynical joke that I read, which I felt guilty laughing at it, but it said 650,000 Haredim protested in Jerusalem and only 11 of them missed work. Because that's part of the problem, that they're in my mind, they're social pariahs. And if I were an Israeli who's paying taxes and serving in the IDF and having children who serve in the IDF, say, you damn well better get off your asses and study Talmud on your own time after you have done your national service. So there are, that's the demographic crisis that Israel is facing, is modern Orthodox Jews, conservative Jews, Reform Jews, secular Jews who have a real problem with Haredim and with extremists within Judaism. Oh yeah. But the way that Israel, and we don't have time to get into it now, but the way that the Israeli parliamentary system is set up, swing bloc parties have extraordinary power. We get a little taste of this here, where we got a couple of nutbags on the left and the right in the United States Congress who can hold up legislation. There's one particular senator from Texas who comes to mind, who I don't know how he keeps getting reelected, but he regularly clogs up the business of government. But because there are only 100 senators and he is able to command a certain block and filibuster and so forth, he is able to gum up the works. In the Israeli parliamentary system, because you need 61 votes to form a government, a political party that has 3 seats or 5 seats and only represents a small percentage of the population can demand a portfolio in the government and hold up every other kind of legislation. That's an existential problem that democracy faces. You know who doesn't have that problem? Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Qatar. They don't have those problems. Democracy is dirty and it's worth it. So I think it's quite telling that the only democracy in the Middle East is the Jewish state. So we expect more of ourselves, including within the state of Israel, expecting, just as there are how many commandments in Judaism? 613 commandments. Do Jews expect everybody in the whole world to follow 613? No. We expect it of ourselves. We don't expect it of everybody else. So go have your dictatorships, whatever. We'll do our thing. Just leave us alone. Let us live and we won't bother you. God, we're the chosen people. Choose somebody else. All right, next time you get to choose, multiple choice, lament or hope. I go with hope. Everybody, thank you very much. Have a good